fourth of our renewable talks with SRP candidates who are seeking board election in the next SRP election coming up this April. Today on the program, we have returning candidate. He's been on the board since 2016, Mr. Nick Brown. Welcome to the show today, Nick.
Thanks, Jared.
Thank you for coming on. So you've been with SRP since 2016.
I have.
Before that, it sounds like you've spent a lot of your life in sustainable energy and renewables. I know that you were with the Department of Energy back in Arkansas. When you moved out to Arizona, you worked at ASU with their sustainable program. Can you talk a little bit about that for us and just give us some background there?
Well, my work at the Arkansas Department of Energy was really interesting. It was fantastic. It was a good grounding for what my career would turn into. And I have done either renewable energy or environmental work for my whole career. So the work at SRP is just the culmination of that, and I feel like I have an opportunity to perhaps make a broader impact.
Great. Tell us a little bit about what you did here at ASU, being in the department over there. Well,
I was the director of sustainability practices. Of course, it's not just the director of sustainability at ASU. That's a pretty broad brush. But we managed things like student activities. I was responsible for creating and managing the greenhouse gas inventory. And we did all kinds of public presentations to increase awareness of sustainability issues.
Great. So you work in the energy sector for several years back home. You move out here, you're with ASU, and then you decide that you want to run to be on a utility board. What kind of led to that for you?
Well, it's all another piece of the same puzzle, I think. The idea that the utilities have such a dramatic impact on our environment became clear to me. Mm-hmm. And so I saw that SRP is really a great institution. We do a lot of things really well. And when I say we, let's get clear that I'm not speaking on behalf of SRP, but I can't help identifying myself with SRP.
Sure.
But we do customer service, community services, affordability, reliability, all extremely well. I'm really proud of our work in those areas. In terms of sustainability, we've got some work left to do.
Well, and I want to ask you about that. I mean, you've been on a board right now where you've been in the minority as far as green agenda pushing or renewable pushing. What's that been like being on that board, particularly in negotiating clean energy policy?
Well, it's amicable but frustrating as well, because the majority of the board is constituted by farm families, the ones who initially created SRP. I don't begrudge that for a moment. They've made very, very important contributions to the valley. And the valley wouldn't be what it is without the water and power that the farm community developed on behalf of businesses and residents of the valley. Having said that, it occurs to me, too, that the role of a power utility has changed a whole lot over the last decade. And specifically our impact on climate, because it's becoming increasingly apparent that greenhouse gas emissions in particular are really our most important and our largest impact on the valley and our communities. not just now, but for future generations as well.
You mentioned some of the frustrations that you've had, being in the minority. Can you describe some of those for us?
Our overall contribution from renewable energy resources to the total energy that we deliver is under 4%. And
Does that include residential production as well?
It does.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So
that's interesting. I had no idea it was that low.
Yeah. And so it's frustrating to me that that's not really what our corporate messaging sends out to the community. And I don't want to beat up on anyone who's in public relations, but
well, the branding would speak otherwise.
The branding speaks otherwise.
Yeah. So okay. So what is, with you being on the board and having those discussions, and what is SRP's tone on solar outside of what we assume it is? Right. We assume that it is fairly dark and gloomy based on what the rate plans reflect. Right. On what consumers are able to sign up for. Is that reflective on the tone behind the doors? What would you say to that?
Well, I would say two things. First, our posture and our approach, our trajectory, in fact, for utility scale solar, that is the 100 megawatt, 200 megawatt systems, is bright. We intend to have over 2 gigawatts, 2,000 megawatts of solar installed by the mid-30s that's not currently installed. That's fairly ambitious. Mm-hmm. I'm proud of that. That's a good thing. For residential solar, not so much yet in terms of the current posture of the board.
And what is the reason for that? Because I get that, it sounds like there's a movement towards commercial solar, towards utility scale solar. What is it about residential solar that seems to be such a threat or such a pain point?
Professor James Bonbright in 1961 wrote a book about utility rates, and cost of service was key to his entire theme throughout the book. Cost of service means that we should create rates that only reflect what our actual expenses are, our costs are for each and every customer. Well, following that path, it turns out that 2.8 cents per kilowatt hour, even if you pay 11 cents as a consumer, as a customer, only 2.8 of that is fuel costs. Mm-hmm. So this is what creates the reimbursement rate then for solar customers, because it's SRP management's contention that the fuel is the only thing we're avoiding. The cost of the fuel is the only thing that we're avoiding when a solar customer contributes energy to the system. So we're not really avoiding distribution, transmission, customer service, community services aspects of what's built into the.
Did I understand that though, right? That you're saying that the fuel is the difference between 2.8 and whatever the retail rate is?
The fuel is 2.8 cents per kilowatt hour.
Okay.
So averaged out over all of our generating plants of all different kinds, coal, gas, hydro, distributed, everything else. So that those fuel costs averaged over all of those is 2.8 cents per kilowatt hour.
And since they say that's the only thing that is avoided, that's the only thing they're willing to pay back.
That's correct.
Okay. So if elected, then what would you, let's say that we get the pro solar board elected, right? We're working our tails off to make that happen. Tell me what the possibilities are there moving forward for solar policy on the residential side.
Well, the first thing we need to do is be honest about full cost accounting. And for us, for SRP, that means including the cost of emitting carbon into the atmosphere. So far, that's unpaid. California pays it because they've got a system that includes it. There's a system on the East Coast that also does that. But in Arizona, we sort of pretend that there's no cost to anyone for us emitting 20 million or so tons of carbon dioxide per year into the atmosphere. And that's partly because all carbon emissions dissipate to a global status not long after they're emitted. And so we don't see and feel the climate impacts of storms and floods and fires that are distant from us.
Well, and in addition to the environmental impact that you're talking about, though, even going back to that last question of trying to claim that the only thing avoided is fuel cost, I'd love to see some additional work done there from an accounting standpoint. It just seems crazy to me that that the claim could be made it's just as cheap to run I don't know how many substations throughout the state and all these plants compared to having people produce power on their own home and run it down to this run it down the side of their house and even store it with their own batteries. I can't see how the economics wouldn't be in favor at that point.
Well, you're right. And furthermore, we're not certain of what the inflationary rate of fossil energy might be. So when you're beginning a side-by-side calculation, we would say this would be the cost of a solar plant, maybe even a solar plus storage plant, and we're pretty certain of what that cost is. And O&M would cost X amount added to the initial cost, and that's about it. With a gas-fired plant, like we just installed 12 units in Coolidge of 50 megawatts each, what the price of natural gas will be throughout the life cycle of those plants is really kind of a guesstimate.
It's an unknown.
It is an unknown.
So with on the residential side, then, and we're trying to get you elected. It's the ratepayers that want to get you elected. They're doing it for the reason of what are you going to do for me, right? What does that look like? Again, if there's a pro solar board, what is your goal, or what do you think could happen from a solar ratepayer standpoint, or rate plans? What would be the hope there? What do you think you guys can get done?
Well, I mean, there's this thing known as net metering. Net metering implies that if you toss 1 kilowatt hour onto the grid and it goes to your next door neighbor, you should get 10.5 cents for that instead of 2.8 cents for that. And I think there's good logic to that. It rewards solar owners for their investment, and it in fact does clean our grid, because more people will buy solar if they're getting compensated in full for the energy that they send to their neighbors. We're avoiding an awful lot of costs. There's no customer service required for me sending my solar energy to Tom Taylor next door.
Right.
And there's no distribution or transmission costs. So it is very considerably higher value than the 2.8 that is fuel only.
And that would, if that happens and we bring back a net metering policy, that completely changes the scope of what solar means in the state of Arizona.
Well, that's exactly right. And we do have decarbonization goals at SRP, and they're going to be hard to achieve with central solar plants only. APS, in fact, has about 3 times more solar, 300% more rooftop solar than SRP has. They're about 5% larger in annual sales and customers. And so there's a disconnect between what APS has done and is doing and what SRP is willing to do. I think that they're actually including some of the other values that SRP chooses to
kind of overlook.
Exclude.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's something that we're very, very excited about, and our company, along with our solar friends all throughout the valley, are putting a lot of energy into making sure that you and other like-minded individuals are going to be on that board to have an opportunity to change that policy and hopefully drive more renewables. Our view is if we were to get to the point where we can get rid of demand charge base rate plans and possibly even bring back net metering, you would see Arizona, particularly SRP, turn into the mecca of solar. You'd have hundreds of companies from around the nation coming to plant roots here and flood SRP territory with rooftop solar, which is great. We want as much solar as possible for all the reasons that you've talked about before. One of the concerns that arises from that, though, is when you bring in so much business all at once, there is a need to make sure that the consumer is protected. And solar at this point has been kind of the wild, wild west. You don't need necessarily a certification to go out and sell solar like you do with insurance and other products. And so a lot of times, unfortunately, particularly in SRP, because it's such a complicated rate plan right now, a solar agent will come in and try to sell customers solar the same way he would sell it to them if he was in Colorado or New Mexico or Florida. And it doesn't work because of the way that the rate plans are set up. And unfortunately, customers have had terrible experiences with solar companies, either out of ignorance by the sales rep or, unfortunately, in some cases, even just dishonesty, right? And so for us, it's really important. Fusion Power, one of our core values is family first. And what we believe about that is that every consumer, every household, every homeowner ought to be treated the way that we'd want to be treated if we were buying it for ourselves, or the way that we'd want our parents to be treated if they were buying a system. And so education, transparency, fairness, honesty, all of those need to be put into place into that sales process. And so our fear then is, if this opens up and you bring in all these reps that don't know anything about what they're doing, it could possibly create a really bad customer experience, and that gives us a black eye on this side. Then on the other side is solar is a very difficult installation process. It's a construction project, right? The installer, as everybody knows, right, we have to go out there, we underwrite the system, we come up with the design, we send it over to SRP for approval, we send it to the city for permitting, and then we're able to get the job installed. Unfortunately, because it's such a cash-intensive business, we've seen hundreds of installers go out of business just in 2023 alone. And that's left customers all over the nation with a system installed on the roof, but can't get it across the finish line, can't get it to PTO. And so I bring up these two issues of, as much as we want pro-solar policy to be in place in SRP, it also brings with it possible risk. What are your thoughts on that consumer protection to make sure that it's done right, that homeowners are getting what has been promised, and that it's done responsibly?
We do have a preferred solar installers list, and that list is managed very meticulously, so that we hope to exclude those who are new to the business, who don't really know all the chops yet, and who work on installations that tend to be defective over a longer term. Beyond that, it is a challenge. We acknowledge that, and when we get solar rooftop rates that are, I think, more appropriate to the actual cost of purchasing and managing operating rooftop, I think we'll see alongside that improved training programs. Our preferred solar installers program, I think, is excellent, because it's not easy to get there.
Sure.
And so our customers, as well as others beyond our service area, should be aware that those kinds of resources exist, and look for those instead of just answering the door and saying,
"Yeah,
sounds great, I've been looking for this."
And I want to make it clear, I don't like regulation. I don't like red tape. It drives me nuts. I'm about free markets and everything like that. But I do want to make sure that another company isn't putting a stick of dynamite in the mine while we're all in there trying to work hard and do it the right way. And
That's
so
right.
I think it's just important that's something that's being considered.
Well, and for our customers, look around, call SRP and ask for the list of preferred solar installers. That's sort of our safeguard against the kinds of things that incipient industries run across.
Sure. Well, good. Well, so you're running for re-election. What geographic area are you in?
In District 7, which is north of Tempe. It actually touches the area of Tempe that's north of the river, the Salt River. or Tempe Town Lake it is there.
Okay.
And it goes pretty much to the Phoenix, Scottsdale border, and then east from there across by varying degrees.
So decent size area in there. How many people in that jurisdiction know that A, there is an SRP election, and B, that they actually can vote?
Well, that's the very first thing we say when we knock doors. And that's the reason that all the experience in the world won't do any good if you don't knock those doors and start with that message.
So right now, what we're doing at Fusion Power, and again with all of our solar friends throughout the valley, we're on the 24th of February. We're having what's called the Ballot Blitz. I know that you're planning on coming with the other pro solar candidates.
That's correct.
We're hoping to have hundreds of people here to meet you and the other individuals that want to push net metering and better solar policy. And then we're all going to go out into these neighborhoods, into Tempe there, and campaign and say, you need to request a ballot. You need to elect Nick Brown and make sure that he's, if you're in that jurisdiction, get him reelected back on that board so that we can push these pro solar policies.
And I'm very grateful for that.
It's going to be a big event. We're really, really excited for it. What are some of the key dates that people need to be aware of as they get ready to vote for this in this election here?
It's a short campaign. So ballots drop, by which I mean they'll be mailed to you if you have signed up to be on the early voting list on March 4th. And then on April 2nd, that's the final day to submit a ballot. I say to submit a ballot is because 99+% of all folks vote by mail on this. It's just kind of by convention. I'd really have to look around for a live in-person polling place. I guess the headquarters.
Yeah, I think most people just mail in these days. And so they got basically a month to do it.
That's correct.
Right, is kind of the idea
that's
there.
Right.
What do you see as the biggest challenge or the biggest hurdle to make sure that we get that majority at this point?
Well, you've alluded to it already. We are doing it the shoe leather way, which is going door to door and telling folks in our 3 to 5 minutes that they will allow us the kinds of things that you've been talking about already, and the kinds of things that are important to us and how we're to be distinguished from our competitors in the race.
The nice thing about it is it feels like it's low-hanging fruit. And we've talked about this before with the other candidates, is that because there's such a small turnout and because so few people know that they even have a voice in this, just a little bit of education is going to go a long way to get those votes in. And 1 or 2% more people voting than they did last time all of a sudden completely changes the outlook of where we're headed with SRP solar.
I think that we're way ahead in messaging, and by that I mean actual anticipation of what kind of performance we want to see. It's a challenge, actually, as you've alluded to get people aware that they ought to participate, because the election is completely unaffiliated with local, county, state, federal elections. It's operated solely by Salt River Project. SRP is a municipality. It's a municipal corporation with the same rights and responsibilities as cities have. And therefore, we can not only issue bonds, but that then allows us to create and govern our own election system. And so it is a horse of a different color. It's a unique mechanism in the state of Arizona.
Are you seeing much opposition from the other side? Do you feel like there's a campaign against what you're doing, or trying to block? How much of a pushback are you seeing at this point?
Well, I think the pushback is honorable, first of all, and I think it's mostly it consists of providing information for why they think they should be the successful candidate, why they should be the director instead of myself and our colleagues in the Clean Energy Coalition.
When it comes down to it, and a consumer's making a choice one way or another, what is going to be the driving issue that they should be looking at voting this way or voting this way?
You know, I think that SRP does a lot of things right that I don't really object to or challenge. We do customer service extremely well. Reliability is extremely high. Affordability, we've discussed already. This is high on the charts. We do community services pretty well. We do customer services extremely well. It really boils down to our environmental performance. So sustainability can be translated into what's your environmental performance. People don't think about this a whole lot because the power as it comes from the distribution pole in your alley to your home is clean. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have emissions that are obviously associated with it, and yet they are. And so for people to recognize and understand that this is not a small thing, actually SRP is responsible currently for about 1/4 of all carbon emissions in the state of Arizona. That includes transportation and industry. So it is really important that we decarbonize quickly and efficiently, and we do so without compromising affordability and reliability. And so that's really, I think, our big challenge. And I'm convinced that solar plus storage and related technologies can get us there.
Great solution to accomplish what you're trying to get at, right?
Absolutely.
Well, that's fantastic. Nick, we appreciate you being on the show today. If you could give a call to action to anybody that is pro-solar and sustainable friendly, what would you say to them? You can look directly in the camera if you'd like, but what would be your message to everybody to make sure that we get you elected and what they can look forward to if we do so?
If we come to your door, please give us a couple of minutes to talk. If we don't come to your door, call SRP, the main office, and request a ballot by mail. And if you do that, then if you're a customer, then you will get votes. And if you're a customer with 2 adults in the household, you'll get 2 votes. If you don't do that, then you're just sort of trying to figure it all out. But that's a pretty direct path to participating in this election and for doing your part so we can do our part for clean energy in Arizona.
Fantastic. Well, Nick, I appreciate you being on the show today. Listeners, thank you for tuning in. Again, this has been the 4th of our series of talks with pro-solar candidates. If you haven't had a chance to meet the other candidates, go back and watch those other episodes. And please join us at the Ballot Blitz February 24th here at Fusion headquarters. That'll be at 12:30, where you can meet Nick and everybody else that's running to be on this board. And let's make an amazing change here in the SRP area. Thanks for watching.